Students, welcome back to U.S. History. Today, we're going to be looking at the European colonization of America starting 1492. And to put all of this in its proper context, for thousands of years prior to this, we have many different diverse Native American tribes that we looked at yesterday. This, what's called as a point of contact between Native Americans and European colonizers, is a huge event which takes place in the late 1400s. It starts with the Spanish, but then we see it extend to the French and the British as well too. Most of the time, we really tend to emphasize the English, their impact on the American colonies, but we also need to be aware that it's larger than just the English colonies, what we consider the 13 colonies. We need to have a good idea of what is happening in the middle of the country, the Southwest, and all of those areas as well too, if we want the full picture of colonial America, right? So I put that starting here in 1492. And if we give that some more context as well, we know that is the year associated with Christopher Columbus. And the shipbuilding that was taking place at the time in Europe developed to a point where they could explore the Americas, even though there were residents already here. They were able to be the first European powers to emerge starting in the late 1400s. Okay? So step one says to analyze this picture. Why do we think it's called colonial America? Right? And so we see, and this is after the 1700s or so. This would have been actually in the mid 1750s or 1760s. It looks like, because there's still quite a big French presence here. But if we look at it on the whole, we have France, who takes up a large part of Canada, parts of the United States here, what would later become the United States. We see Spain down here, really the first big European colonizer. And then we have Great Britain or England over here to the right, which we come to know as the New England colonies, middle and southern 13 colonies, right? And so it's important to keep our ideas of this outward, right? That there's a lot of different layers to this. How England treated their colonies is not the same way French treated their colonies. How Spanish colonizers treated Native Americans is completely different from how the French did it, right? So we want to look at some of this diversity within the different European colonizers with respect to their attitudes toward natives and why they're colonizing America in the first place. So to give us some good background on this, we're going to watch the video in step 2 from the beginning to 7:30. And I love the visualization of this content here with how this guy analyzes the material and how he shows the maps as well too. So I want you to identify and submit 3 causes and 3 effects of colonialism. Why did it start? 3 reasons why it started, and what happened because it started. 3 effects. So let's watch this together.
In the middle of the 15th century, these were roughly the territories known to Europe. Despite the discovery 500 years earlier of a tip of North America by a Viking tribe, the continent and the tens of millions of souls that populate it are still unknown to European powers. For centuries, Europe is mainly oriented towards Asia, from where silk, spices, and other goods originate. Trade routes from China.
So you could already use that as one of the causes. It's a need for certain products. They're looking to expand, have these economic places where that they can make a profit from, where they could do trading as well too.
China and East Indies are lucrative for those who control them. By weaving a maritime network across the Mediterranean Sea, the powerful republics of Venice and Genoa dominate trade in Europe. But the monarchies of the Iberian Peninsula aim to break this monopoly and set off in search of new routes. More efficient ships are built, boosting exploration of the Atlantic Ocean.
Shipbuilding, like I mentioned before, that's another big cause, right?
A native of the Republic of Genoa, Columbus lived in Lisbon. The young navigator dreams of discovering a new road to Cathay and Cipango, found in present-day China and Japan. According to his calculations, the territories are close enough to attempt a crossing. He presents the project to the Portuguese king, who refuses to finance it as the country focuses on the exploration of a route via Africa. Columbus then tries his luck with Spanish Catholic kings. After some hesitation, they eventually agree to fund the expedition. Christopher Columbus sets off on his voyage in 1492 as the head of 3 ships and a crew of 90 men. After 70 days of sailing, the expedition discovers an island in the Bahamian archipelago. The first encounter with the natives is peaceful and cordial. Convinced he found the East Indies, Columbus calls them Indians.
Think about that too. We still informally refer to natives of America as Indians sometimes, right? And that comes across from a historical tendency for Christopher Columbus believes he is in India, right? So that's where that misconception comes from.
For 3 months, he hops from island to island in search of Cipango. Upon his return to Spain, he is welcomed as a hero. He sets sail again the following year, this time with 17 ships, to establish a permanent settlement on the island of Hispaniola. La Isabela is created in honor of the Queen of Castile, with Columbus as governor. He continues to explore surrounding areas.
Something they don't directly state, but another really cause for colonization is political power and prowess, right? There are certain incentives for people like Christopher Columbus to have their expeditions funded by these Spanish people of power, right? So there's incentives for them to be doing this, and they would not be taking all these ships to go unless there was a financial incentive to do so.
To avoid wars in newly discovered lands, the Spanish and Portuguese kings meet and come up with a plan to share the territories. A meridian is defined, with newly discovered lands to its west going to Spain and those in the east going to Portugal. Moreover, the Pope tasks Spanish kings with evangelizing the new territories. England also tries to reach Cathay, but from the north, leading it to discover new lands. For its part, Portugal, with Vasco da Gama, eventually succeeds in opening a new sea route to India. During the second expedition, Portuguese ships head westward to bypass strong sea currents, thereby discovering a new land located east of the meridian of Tordesillas. Colonies are quickly established there. In 1506, Christopher Columbus dies without knowing he had discovered a new continent. It is Amerigo Vespucci, another navigator who had traveled several times to the land, who first suggests that it's a new world. The continent is then named America after him. Around Hispaniola, explorers called the conquistadors set off to discover and conquer new land. Rapidly, the condition of the natives deteriorates.
So that's one of the effects, right? So initially, whenever Native Americans crossed the Bering Strait, which is up near Alaska, connecting to Russia and all of that, 20,000 years ago or so, they're not used to, their immune systems, their bodies are not used to all of the newer diseases in Europe that have come as a part of these last 100 thousands of years or so. So their immune systems are not built the way that Europeans' immune systems are built, leading them to be very prone to these different diseases. As common as they might be for Europeans, they're not common for Native Americans.
Lands are stolen, people are enslaved, and moreover, previously unknown diseases imported by Europeans spread through the continent and decimate populations. In Cuba, conquistador Hernán Cortés hears of a city called Tenochtitlan, a supposed city of gold. Having reached land during his expedition in search of the city, Cortés realizes he is in the Aztec Empire, which rules over surrounding territories and peoples. He takes advantage of the situation to propose or impose by force that
So somebody's going to do it eventually, right? One of these powerful European colonizers are going to do it by force. They're able to take people's political power, right? Or they're able to exert their own political influence in these new lands.
the locals become part of the Spanish Empire. His strategy pays off. Cortes is guided by locals to their capital, where they receive a warm welcome. Just south of the continent, Ferdinand Magellan, seeking to go around the world, discovers a
Love how
strait
this is
that would bear his
visualized.
name and enters the Pacific Ocean. The following year, war breaks out in Tenochtitlan. The Spanish and their allies impose a siege of 75 days around the capital. Moreover, a smallpox epidemic eventually exhausts the Aztec people, who surrender. Cortes enters the city and becomes the governor of New Spain. Spanish colonies cultivate local products previously unknown in Europe, such as maize, potato, tobacco, and cacao. These products, as well as gold and silver obtained from conquests and from mines, are exported to Europe.
So a lot of it is taking the resources from the land in which the Europeans are going to and taking that back to their country. Just straight up taking these local resources.
Settlements also take a religious turn with the arrival of the Franciscans, who wish to establish an even purer church than back home and baptize natives. Cortes now begins a conquest of the Mayan people.
If you want to sum up the effects, some people refer to it as God, gold, and glory, right?
While further south, conquistador Francisco Pizarro hears of the supposedly rich Inca Empire. After several unsuccessful expeditions, he returns with an army in 1531. The Inca Empire is already weakened by smallpox, with the disease claiming the life of its emperor a few years earlier, sparking a succession war. During a meeting between Pizarro and the new emperor Atahualpa, the latter is captured and executed despite several tons of gold received for his release. French Protestants also tried to colonize the New World, but they fail because of existing Spanish and Portuguese forces and because of adverse climatic conditions and diseases. Eventually, more resources are allocated into colonization, and New France is founded in order to develop trade in fishing and furs. The English and Dutch quickly follow suit and settle along the coast. The colonies would face off many times, following the patterns of war taking place in Europe. Generally, the French ally with local tribes, while the English fight alongside the Iroquois.
What we really have is a divergent way of looking at the native populations now, how they're being used, if they're being exploited as slaves, or if they're being used for trade primarily.
In the mid-17th century, the slave trade blows up. European ships go to Africa loaded with goods which are exchanged against slaves who are transported in harsh conditions.
You have to mention slavery as a direct effect of colonialism. You have to. It's just what comes from this economic desire.
To America, where they are exchanged against local products and gold. Slaves are then mainly used in plantations, while the ships returning to Europe sell American products at high prices. In 1763, New France lost the fourth and final intercolonial war. The colony then comes under control of the British, who cede a portion to Spanish territories in exchange for Florida.
So that's really enough table setting for us, and that really makes up the map around this time in the mid 1700s or so. Now that you had a good idea of who, what, where, when, why, you're going to look at an assignment in OneNote. It's called European Colonization of America. So you're going to read the following and complete the question and chart at the bottom based on the information from the reading. Notify me via submission in Canvas once you are done. So a good little reading. Mostly we'll be looking at primary sources, but this is a wonderful secondary source that we are looking at, and just a chart to go along with it, just so we can look at these three major colonizers in terms of how they are different and how they affected the land of America differently. And what you ultimately submit is your response to step 2 and your OneNote submission in step 3. And with that, I hope you have a wonderful day. Please let me know if you need any help. Otherwise, farewell.